Hey, thanks for checking out the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. This is episode 14, and I truly appreciate you coming back to check out our episode today. Today is August 31st. This year has flown by. August 31st, 2018, episode 14. Might be, I don't know when you're listening to it. Doesn't really matter. You just need to know it's episode 14. And we've got a great guest on today. We have got Jeff Fisher, Mr. Jeff Fisher from highschoolfootballamerica.com. highschoolfootballamerica.com. He knows more about high school football, I think, and the high school football landscape across America better than anyone I know personally. Name a state, Jeff will tell you who the top teams are in that state. He'll tell you who the teams are that are struggling in that state. Not only that, he'll tell you about some coaches. He'll tell you about some kids. And what I love about Jeff, he gets to know these communities. And so I'm really looking forward to having Jeff share with us today. I came to know Jeff years ago when I was looking to promote my book, Building Championship Caliber Football Programs, where I interviewed 108 head football coaches from 42 states. I asked each of them 3 questions and then narrowed all their responses down to the top 10 characteristics of state champion football programs. And as I was looking to promote that, I ran across Jeff. He was really intrigued by the book, was gracious enough to have me on his podcast. And so I got to know Jeff back in 2012. He's a co-founder, editor-in-chief of High School Football America, which is a media partner with USA Today High School Sports. In addition, he's the host and producer of 2 different radio shows you need to check out if you haven't already: High School Football America and the National High School Coaches Association Sports Hour. These 2 shows average over 150 downloads per show. So check them out on Twitter. You can find Jeff at Jeff Fisher Media or at HSFB America. HSFB, that's High School Football. HSFB America or at Jeff Fisher Media. So check him out. Jeff has been covering high school sports for a long, long time. Before he got into kind of his own business, he was a sports anchor with Fox Sports Net out in Chicago, Bay Area and Ohio regions. While in the Windy City, he also reported on professional and college teams. Before Chicago, he was a sports director at WFMZ TV in Philadelphia market. So Jeff's been around a long time, and I'm happy to have him on the show today. We're going to talk about all things high school football here in 2018. We're going to talk about his ranking system. He ranks the top 100 teams every year. And we're also going to talk about his new book, which I'm really intrigued in, High School Football in Texas. He has spent a lot of time in Texas talking to the best players and coaches to ever come out of that state. We're going to talk about the differences between high school football in Texas and California for a little bit too. So great show coming up. Again, thanks for joining us here on Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. You are listening to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore, a place for all coaches to call home. The Coach's Locker Podcast is a part of the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Please visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches coming to you every single podcast with valuable information to help you and your program. The Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore exists to help prepare coaches to be hired for the job of their dreams and to provide coaches with dynamite resources to become even more successful in their field. You can reach me on Twitter at Coach Fore. That's at COACHFORE. And my podcast home is at 8laces.org/podcast. That's 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Locker Podcast with Chris Fore. Now, let's get after it. All right, we are on today with Mr. Jeff Fisher, the founder and editor-in-chief of highschoolfootballamerica.com. That's High School Football America. Jeff, welcome aboard. Thanks for joining me.
Chris, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad the tables are turned. It used to be me the other way, so I'm looking forward to questions from you, Coach.
Yeah, this is exciting. As the world turns, right? The world is a big life. I guess is a circle. I wrote a book, 2011. Jeff was the first person to reach out to me to interview me about that, and now, as you said, the tables have been turned, and this is exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And the only thing that's not exciting about it is I'm not right there in the Southern California area with you, having moved the home base between Texas and Atlanta. But you can keep me up to date on all the good SoCal stories.
There you go. Absolutely. Well, we start off with every podcast here for the audience to get to know you just a little bit. We take a few minutes. I got 7 questions for you, Jeff. I call it the kickoff, the tip-off, and the first pitch. Jeff, tell us about the first team that you ever played on and what you remember from that team.
Well, you sent me these questions, so I'm a little bit ready, but I had to think about this. And at first, my knee jerk was going to be it was my 8-year-old baseball team. But in fact, because of where my birthday fell, it was my junior Pee Wee football team in Wilsonboro, Pennsylvania, which is also kind of tucked inside Easton. And I was a 68-pound defensive tackle.
There we go.
And I remember, and I don't have it with me. It's tucked away. It's somewhere tucked in storage right now. But I have a photograph of me, the team picture, and I wore a leather helmet. So this is, 1968. I guess I just gave away my age. And I remember one big game in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, against the East Lawn Clippers, where I had 10 tackles. And I remember that because had I led the team in tackles, I was going to get from my parents a cheesesteak and milkshake, and I accomplished that goal.
Awesome. That's a great memory. Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, I mean, loaded, right, with a rich tradition of football, without a doubt, out there.
Oh, no doubt about it. I joke with everybody. We're still trying to throw the ball in the air. That 3 yards in a cloud of dust still exists, but we're getting a little better at it. But yeah, we still move the ball the old way.
Yeah, Jeff, how about the last team you ever played on, and what you remember from that team?
Yeah, it was funny. My senior year of baseball, I broke my finger in the very first game, and didn't play. I think it was like the second inning, so I didn't play anything at all. And then I went into Legion baseball, and I'm not sure, if every area in the country has Legion baseball, but you can play, that beyond, depending when your birthday is, beyond your high school year. So I got into the year after high school, played a freshman year of college, and I was able to play on that Legion team. I had another injury, and they switched me to shortstop, my normal position. They didn't really have a second baseman. And I made the All-Star team, which was very, very cool. But baseball is a sport that I was good at. We'll just say not very good. I was good at. I never grew up. That 68-pound kid in junior Pee Wee's never put on weight until he got old. And so baseball was kind of my sport growing up.
Hey, that's you and me both. That was my absolute favorite sport. I really grew up playing baseball. Man, there's nothing better than hanging out at the Little League field all day.
Oh yeah.
Who's been your main mentor? Now you're kind of in that media profession, Who's been your main mentor in your career field?
I've got one, and he's still alive. He just stopped doing play-by-play 3 years ago. His name is Dick Hammer. Now everybody always laughs when they hear that name, but it's not so funny anymore because Sam Darnold, the now New York Jets quarterback, former San Clemente quarterback, that was his grandfather, and Dick Hammer is the man that mentored me. Yeah, it was funny. I told Jaime Ortiz, Coach Ortiz, the head coach there with the Tritons, that same grandfather's name is my mentor, and he was the guy that had the foresight, or as I always joke with him, the stupidity to put me on the air when I was a teenager. So I started when I was 14 years old, and he is just one of the most wonderful men. I try to emulate him. He did Lafayette College basketball and football until he was 80 years old. I think he just later on this month maybe turns 84 years old, but really taught me the ins and the outs and how to do it the right way. And really, I had a kind of a estranged relationship with my father after my parents divorced. He literally, in many, many ways, is my father, and I tell him that to this day.
Wow. So, how you started? Was it radio play-by-play you started doing?
Yes.
Okay.
I started like everybody does when you're a young kid. You try and get your way into the booth, and I was 14 and surrounded by these guys that were anywhere from 28 to 30 and above, and I was a spotter and a statistician. So what that means is statistician, that's pretty normal. I think most people know that. I was, yards, passing yards, rushing yards, tackles, all that. Put that down on the paper and you feed it to the play-by-play and color people. The spotter is the guy that's actually up in the booth helping those two people recognize who is making the tackle usually. In some cases, you may point out receivers and all that, but that's how I began, and it evolved into the fact where, like I said, he had the foresight or the stupidity to say, let's put this teenage kid on the air. And
wow.
I always tell Trish Hoffman, who is my partner in crime and life and business, that my voice grew up before my body did. So that's how it all started.
That's tremendous. And so, how did you start highschoolfootballamerica.com? Because in my opinion, and if you've never visited, you got to check out highschoolfootballamerica.com. How did you start that? In my opinion, it's the authority on high school football in America. So it's a tremendous website name. But how did you start that?
Well, and thank you for the compliment, and thank you for always supporting it, whether it's on Twitter or doing things like this. But basically, it evolved out of I moved from radio into television in Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania in the early 90s, we started, one of the first ever high school football highlight shows, and it's still on to this day. It's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. The only bad thing I didn't do is I didn't own a piece of it. That was the dumb businessman in me. But I always said, because of the fact that I don't own a piece of it, that I always wanted to do my own thing. And Trish and I, Trish, allowed me to have my expensive hobby, and we just started grinding on it. And, by grinding on it, what I mean is, we started, I think, 2003, when the internet was just kind of evolving and trying to come up with some ideas of what people would like. And what I said was, I just wanted to be the storyteller, and I wanted to do four things. I wanted to support student athletes, promote coaches, promote schools, and therefore you're going to promote the community. So those were kind of our four little mantras. I started with, on Blogger, which was the Google, blog site at that time. Yeah. I started 52 different blogs named in the high school football huddle. Trish, who's much smarter than me, said, that's a stupid name. No one's going to ever like that. I said, well, I kind of like it. I said, well, here's the deal. We were actually vacationing in Laguna Beach. I said, well, if you're so smart, come up with a name. And she said, well, how about High School Football America? I said, well, that's a great name, but there's not going to be a URL. You're not going to get highschoolfootballamerica.com. And I said, well, go find out if you can. And lo and behold, it was there. And we hopped on it. And it was kind of funny. We did a story like maybe 2 or 3 days later, and I called a person. I think we were doing a video in Iowa, and I called the person up, and I said, oh, hey, this is Jeff Fisher from High School Football America. And she said, oh, yeah, I've heard of you.
Wow.
Like, it couldn't have hurt, but it rang so true in her ear, because it's long, but it says what it is, right? We're high school football based, and it's all about America. So that's how it all started, and it's grown over this time, and we put our heart, sweat, and all that good stuff into it, our own money, and you make mistakes along the way, but along the way you get to meet wonderful people, whether it's players, coaches, communities, and it has put a smile on my face from day one, and I'm just very proud of what we do and how we do it.
Yeah, it's just a tremendous site. Like I said, if you haven't seen it, you got to check out High School Football America. I think, Jeff, I'm in the business, as you know, on the side with helping coaches with the job search process, and the job board that you have on here. I really think it's one of the best out there because of how easy it is to navigate. So you got to check out that link, folks. And then the stadium project. I love seeing stadiums all over the place. I drive my wife nuts because every now and then when we're traveling, I'll say, hey, there's a high school stadium. Let's go take a picture. She said, what do you want a picture for? I do, because I love high school football. So I love that database you have on there, the stadium project. This is a question I had a little later, but we're talking about it now, so we'll talk about that. What's your favorite stadium on your stadium project?
Well, at the risk
or maybe
of
a few of them.
I was going to say, at the risk of aggravating everyone that isn't mentioned on that, the big 30,000-foot view is the smaller, the better. You know, I love pulling off. You know, I've driven across the country back and forth, 3 times, but 6 if you count back and the forth. And I love like these small town little stadiums. There's just something about them that I love. But I'll give a couple here that I really do like on there that I would recommend people go check out. Maybe my favorite as far as picturesque that I hadn't expected and didn't know about until I got there. I read about it a little bit, is the stadium at El Paso High School in El Paso, Texas.
Yep.
All concrete. Started in it was the original site of the Sun Bowl. And actually the Sun Bowl, before it became a college football event at the end of the season, the first Sun Bowl, if I'm not mistaken, and I probably should have looked this up, but I think it was a high school team taking on a maybe D3 type of team, and maybe while we're talking here, I can Google it here to get the story out. But it sits up on the hill. It overlooks Juarez, Mexico. The school wraps around the horseshoe, if you will, behind. It is just picturesque. If you go on and Google El Paso High School, you'll see one fine stadium. And maybe the similarity between that one and my hometown one that I love, that unfortunately is going to be renovated. And they're not going to renovate old school. They're going to put in aluminum stadium seats and all that. Is Cottingham Stadium, also built in the 20s. In Easton, Pennsylvania. It is just absolutely magnificent. You go in there, you feel Friday nights, and that would be it. The modern day stadiums are awesome, right? Allen's, Eagle Stadium is just insanely cool. Katie's Legacy Stadium, but again, I would think if I had to go through a list and really go 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all older stadiums. My high school, my alma mater, still doesn't have lights, and behind it sits the original Dixie Cup factory. Literally, there's this massive Dixie Cup on top of this abandoned building. So I guess I already told you. I started I was playing football in '68, so you can kind of figure out I'm 58. I like old school stuff. How about you?
Yeah, there you go. No, that Jones Stadium, El Paso, I think that's the most beautiful one without a doubt on this list. All these pictures, and I love the pirate ship at Palisades there in Pennsylvania. That one's pretty sweet too. But yeah, no, definitely, coaches, check out Jeff's stadium project on highschoolfootballamerica.com. It's real sweet. So a long time in the business. How about a mistake you've made? What's one of the worst mistakes you've made in this business covering high school football?
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad you prefaced it with high school football.
There you go.
The worst mistake I can't say on the air. I did say it on the air, and it was during a college basketball game, and we'll just leave it at that. If anybody ever meets me out to have a beer or something, I'm more than willing to share it. I'll share it with you off the air. But I kind of said one of George Carlin's 7 words you shouldn't say accidentally. But on the air, I don't know if other than mistakenly getting the wrong nickname or something like that. I really I can't really think of anything that I did bad, but I will tell you this: when I make a mistake, it drives me crazy. I've gotten better at it, but there were times when I would, let's just say I mistakenly called, the modern day Monarchs, the modern day, Stallions. And it would take me till 3, 4, 5 in the morning after the show was over that I would just ruminate about that, trying to fall asleep and couldn't fall asleep. But I don't think I really had anything too bad. But the one in the girls' college basketball game was kind of Hall of Fame bad.
Well, hey, that's just the same thing as coaches. We deal with that all the time. You make a bad play call or decide to bunt a kid over and it goes bad. We lose sleep too. So. How about this?
Oh yeah, I know.
What are you most proud of, Jeff, in your career so far? What's the thing that your greatest accomplishment in this business covering high school football?
I think it goes back to what I said our mission was when we started at the beginning, which is, recruiting's done well by websites. I'm not a big fan of that, as you know, but I think we've stuck to the mission of storytelling and unveiling stories about players, coaches, communities, schools, however you want to, put the last part of it together. I think that's what we've done right. And, the greatest thing ahead, I don't know what that could be, but as long as we continue to do that, I think we'll have faithful people that come to the website that appreciate what we do. And what I am the most proud about is, and it comes back to, I think you can equate, and I'm not bragging, it's maybe going to sound that way, but people like yourself, coaches, realize that I'm not a journalist. I appreciate your profession. And I always respect a coach, no matter what the situation may be, whether it's telling the story, telling a tough story, going out to practice, not interrupting the practice, letting you guys do what you do best. So I would say those two things are what I'm most proud about. I don't think there's a story here or there, but if you do those 4 things that I talked about at the top and appreciate what coaches go through, then you'll be okay, and you'll always get somebody to pick up the phone and talk to you.
Without a doubt. Yeah, very wise. What's your favorite vacation spot, Jeff?
Used to be Laguna Beach, and then I started so now I guess it's my new vacation spot. But because you are a baseball guy, my favorite place that I ever went on a vacation, I guess it was a vacation, it was a birthday gift from Trish. I got to go to Dyersville and to see the Field of Dreams field and play on that field and do that. That's kind of special. That's a bucket lister.
Absolutely.
Neat thing to do. I highly recommend it to you.
I'll have to do that. What's your favorite thing to do outside of your business, outside of, you can't say family or business. What's a hobby? How do you like to spend your time?
Yeah, you know what? I like cooking. I love cooking. I'm pretty good at it, and I've learned a lot from Trish. We like to cook as kind of that's our respite, our breakdown, and the new big thing here in Atlanta is the Big Green Egg, which is it's a Georgia thing, a Southern thing, and it's this really cool charcoal grill. And I think out of the month and a half we've been here, I think all but 3 or 4 nights I've cooked on it. So that's my thing. That's what I like to do.
Outstanding. So what do you most enjoy? So that was our introduction, kind of a long introduction, but I got us off track. That's the kickoff, the tip-off on the first pitch here with Jeff Fisher, the founder of highschoolfootballamerica.com. You can follow him on Twitter. It's at Jeff Fisher Media, at Jeff Fisher Media, on Instagram at High School Football America. So what do you enjoy most? And you kind of hit on this a little bit, Jeff, your relationship with coaches, but what do you enjoy most about covering high school football?
You know what? It's still the purest form of sports. I sometimes use this phrase, it's the last bastion of amateurism, if you will. And that's not disrespectful to field hockey or wrestling or high school, none of that stuff. I think it's just really the purest form of what you can do out there. You can go on a Friday night and see people of all walks, young and old, coming together for the common good. And, I grew up in an area, you talked about Pennsylvania, which is very traditional. We've got that really kind of old school stuff. My hometown was the third town where the Declaration of Independence was read back in 1776. So there's this just kind of old time feel for it, and it doesn't matter if you're in Easton, Pennsylvania, or wherever you go. I mean, I enjoyed learning about the traditions in Southern California. I've been in 19 different states where I've watched games in person. And to me, to be honest with you, I would rather go to a new stadium town every night of the week.
Wow.
It's kind of hard to do. I mean, certainly out there in Southern California, you've got that core group, and you have these great games every Friday night, right? But so you go back and back and back. I think if I had my druthers, I would want to go to a brand new town and experience it. And going back to what I love to do, Trish and I love to figure out, places that have cool food, like in Iowa at an 8-man game we went to once. We had a butterfly pork chop.
Wow.
And a brat burger, which was literally like the brat was without the casing, and they made it into a burger. It was just good stuff, and it was made down the street. So that's what I love. It's America. It's high school football. America is supposed to tell the story of America through the lens of high school football. So I don't know if that's eloquent, but that's what I think.
No, that's tremendous. I mean, I was fired back in 2011. Private school I was at brought in a college coach to, they thought that would recruit a bunch of kids in there and whatnot. And so anyway, long story short is I found myself not coaching for the first time in more than a decade. And man, I got to go out and just see games and pick my game of the week, kind of like you're talking about. And that was just, it was so much fun going to just whatever game I wanted to. So I'm jealous you've been able to do that for a long time.
It's a lot of fun, and I can't even imagine, being a coach like that and doing what you did for so long. You talk about detox.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it was. Yep.
Calling plays from the stands.
Yep, there you go. So what are some of the biggest changes? I mean, there's been so many changes in high school football in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years. I started coaching in 1993. So what are the biggest changes you've seen as a journalist and a friend of high school football over all these years?
Yeah. Let's you and I have had these conversations. I hate recruiting, but I appreciate the fact that these young men get to, go to the next level, and it's easier for them to be found and get their scholarships and hopefully, take that education to the next level. And when I say recruiting, I'm talking about the recruiting websites. Absolutely hate them. 7-on-7 is annoying to me. It's not football, but, it is what it is. And what's, really the thing, and I know you were at the heart of this, it annoys me about the bashing the sport of football is getting right now. It's safer than it's ever been. It's not without its issues, but come on, folks. This sport does more for young men than any other sport, I believe, because of the things we've talked about, all the importance of it and whatnot. So those are probably the things, the hot buttons. I think the last one, and I was on an online chat last night talking about this, where I'm from, we have a lot of coaches that are still coaching that are, 30, 40 years deep as HCs that, began back in the day where I don't even know where they called offensive coordinators, right? They're just a position coach or whatever. But it's disappointing to me that I see a lot of these older guys not only dropping out, but really being forced out for reasons that have, nothing to do with what they just shouldn't be reasons. We had a guy at Aliquippa, Mike Ditka's hometown in Western PA, just forced out because he was 74. And, oh, my God, he made it to 6 state championship games, but he only won one. But he's 74, so he's probably not in touch with the kids. Where I would argue, and know what I would argue. I don't want to go off on too much of a jag. You and I could probably spend a lot of time with that. But that would be the one that annoys me the most, that coaches, again, doesn't just have to be the HC or the OCDC, whatever it is. I think that there's a lack of respect there, and it's going to be bad for the sport when guys burn out or they're forced out or whatever it may be, and you only have guys that last, 5 or 10 years in the business. And that's because of a number of things, not the least of which is it's no longer a 4 or 5 month a year job, right? It's
Yeah,
365.
yeah. Jeff, I'd be interested in hearing this. Since you cover the nation, which is, I don't know, I really don't know how you have your hand on so many programs nationally here, but I've been tracking the job changes here in Southern California the last 3 years, the head coach job changes, and it's about 19% this year, is right around 17% last year. That means 17 this year, 19% of the head coaches in Southern California, that's about 600 schools, larger than many states, have changed over. They got fired, resigned, or took another job. It's been eye-opening. I had no clue it was that many until I started documenting that. But you hear these stories from all over, like you just mentioned. Is it this bad all over, a turnover rate that high? I mean, some of the stories I've heard here in California are just mind-boggling. Is this a nationwide thing?
Yeah, it's getting worse, and I guess that's what I was hinting at. I don't think it's going to get any better. I don't think there's going to be a leveling off or anything along those lines. It's just, parental pressures. It's a lot of things. Time spent. You guys, you have a family, you have a wife. I don't know. It probably is a longer conversation about things that are more than just coaching, but it might be America in general. But it is a trend. It is a trend that I've seen. It's a trend I don't like. And, I think the other thing that, and I know you point this out a lot, is, the coaches and what they make, right? Everybody sees that there's a big coach in Allen, or Alabama has 7 guys over 125,000. But at the end of the day, that's because they're teaching or they're an athletic director,
Yep.
and the stipends are so small. I mean, it's just so distorted. So at the end of the day, when it's the end of the year, you're sitting down with your wife, you had a good year, you think you accomplished everything, you got kids to reach beyond, who they could be, what their goals were, and maybe you went 6-4, let's just say, and then you start dividing the hours into your stipend of $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and you realize that, you can make more going to McDonald's. And, then you add the parent in there. So again, I think it's a trend. I'm not sure where it all started, but anyway, at the end of the day, maybe not as bad, and I know how much of a good job you do with it there in Southern California, but it is around. It's in every state, and it's only going to get worse.
Yeah. That's what's sad to hear you say it's only gonna get worse. And I had a newspaper out here interviewed me a couple months ago about my job board, and they asked me that question: is this going to get better? And I mean, at least I know here in Southern California, I don't see it getting better at any time. When have you seen? When did you see this trend to listen to parents and pull the trigger on a coach so quick? When do you think this kind of started, Jeff? Have you thought much about that? Or I know you can't pinpoint an exact year, but is it 5 years? Is it 10 years?
It's probably, I haven't thought about it, but I guess, probably within a 10-year window, maybe even a little bit tighter. It's meaning closer, maybe 5. I don't know, but I would say within the last 10 years, maybe back to 2005 or whatever. And, it's hard to say, sometimes things happen and you don't recognize it when they start, right? But now when we're knee deep into it, up to our butts and alligators with it, then you're like, oh,
yeah.
So probably, I would say over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. What's the biggest challenge you face covering high school football?
Being one person with 15,000 schools and a country that's pretty wide.
Come on, Jeff.
No. Well, that really is the challenge. You know what the challenge is convincing people out there that you want to do things a little bit differently, right? And when I literally say, give me a good story, and I don't care if you're in Miles, Iowa, or, in Los Angeles, California, or, it doesn't matter to me. Just, pick up the phone. I will answer the phone. I will talk to you. And that's really what got me the book, by the way. That's how that all started. They saw that I have a deep-seated passion for this sport. And, that's, I wish I could do something on every state as deep as I do on the stories that I do, right? I'd love to give Wyoming as much credit as I do Southern California, or now here in Georgia or Pennsylvania, whatever it is. I think that's the biggest challenge, trying to be that person. And that's just the perfectionist in me, I guess.
Yeah, no, that is very challenging. How many schools play football in the nation?
15,000.
15,000 schools.
That's counting. Yeah, that's throwing in some 8-man and 6-man in there, but
sure.
That's what the number is. Okay,
so next topic here. You just boiled down 15,000 schools into a top 100 that you just released on your site. Talking with Jeff Fisher, highschoolfootballamerica.com. So I don't know. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago I saw you first starting this, but when that's just when I saw it. How long have you been doing a top 100, Jeff?
Well, no, this is only our second year for the top 100. We began really in earnest when we came to California, to Los Angeles on Fox Sports Radio in 2012. We did an opinion poll, which most everyone has. We did a top 25, and then after 2012, I spent some time creating an algorithm, which we've used since. So all of our rankings are based on an algorithm that I created. I like to call it proprietary. It makes people think it's a little bit more important, but again, it's probably a word that it makes me laugh a little bit more. But it is proprietary. It's my own, so I guess it is proprietary. We started that in 2013. We did a top 25 with it, got a lot of crap, big shoulder. Being a journalist and a football coach aren't very different. You get people yelling at you no matter what you do.
There you go.
And, then I think the following year we started with a top 25, and then we called it On the Bubble, so that became a top 50. And then finally last year I just said, well, we got this algorithm. We have all this information in it. Katie bar the door. That's a back east term. Katie bar the door. We're going to do a top 100. And I remember Steve Spiewak, who used to do it for Max Preps and then had left. Steve texted me. He said, have you lost your friggin' mind? And I said, well, we'll see. And then, so that got us to where we are now. And, the nice thing about I joke that I've got to have, broad shoulders, but most people, I don't get a lot of blowback on it because, I tell people it's not my opinion, and we've been pretty accurate. Last year, 62 of our top 100 preseason teams ended up in the final top 100. So we're very proud of what we have. It's not again. It's a lot of work, and I respect people that want to complain, but we really haven't had that. And I better be knocking on some wood here. Okay, we'll just hit my head. How's that?
So, it's got to be a tremendous undertaking. But like you said, you sat down, you put together an algorithm. I know you're not going to tell us all the details of that, but what are some of the things that go into that algorithm? I mean, is it the size of school matter? Is it last season? What are some of the ways that gets measured?
Yeah, and let me just preface this. I would prefer not to do a preseason poll because the algorithm is designed to break down on-field, actual games being played. I do the preseason for the fans. There's strength of schedule, there's tradition. Size of school doesn't matter, but size of school versus size of school matters. So we put some things in there. There's about 15 criteria in all that we use.
Wow.
And again, the preseason one is a scaled down version because it's hard to do so we're looking at, and again, I just kind of cracked on the recruiting sites, but you got, who are the top players coming back? Where does that rank and all that sort of stuff? So that's what we do for the preseason. But what happens in mid August when we get the games being played, then we start actually, then it takes over. So you'll see jumping and all that. But like I said, 62 out of 100, 62%. You're a baseball guy. If you hit 620, come on.
That's pretty darn good. That's pretty darn good. Absolutely. Well, we're recording this here on July 10th. It's not going to – you folks are listening on August 31st here, 2018 or after. So I know in California, by the time you listen to this, we'll have 3 games done. So I'm not going to break down this top 100 much at all because it'll be old news by that time. But now I do have to give you some crap here, Jeff.
Go ahead.
I know you got thick skin, but IMG Academy, talk to me about your rationale of putting them on a poll.
Well, and I'm not going to give you my personal opinion, but I will tell you this. I called a lot of people that I respect around the country, from media people to coaches that have been doing this for a long time. And, it came out 50-50, which surprised me because I had considered actually pulling them. So you're getting a little bit of a scoop here.
Oh, okay.
But ultimately, not only did I go with the people that I respect, but here's what it really came down to is they are playing so many teams around the country that are really good programs, like a public school like a Hoover. And I know people would argue, well, they're not really a public school. They're getting I don't want to get into that argument. But because the algorithm breaks down, on-field activity, it would actually have hurt, and this is the decision that I made, it would actually hurt the teams that they're playing. It would reduce their position in the algorithm. So I decided to keep them in.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Kevin Wright, the head coach at IMG. I know his dad, who's a lifelong head coach, 50-plus years, winningest coach in Indiana. He's like 5'4", Bud Wright. I've been to Sheridan, all 3,000 people. Again, I respect what he does, how he does it. He's in a really tough position. Personally, not a big fan of their concept. But again, if my mission is to promote kids, coaches, schools, and communities, I've got to kind of stick with that. But I know they're also hurting teams on the other side of the ledger. I on a whole, I guess if you put a gun to my head right now, I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be the biggest fan of keeping them in. But again, if it impacts other schools, I don't want that to happen.
Well, a couple things you said. One, the impact on other schools. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense as to why you would keep them in there. And then two, it does. It fits your mission, like you talked about, telling those stories of, communities and kids and coaches. And I don't know the head coach there. I don't know any coaches on staff out there. But I was born and raised down in North San Diego County, one-horse town, high school. It's kind of a throwback. They still today, they have, I don't know, there's maybe 65, 70,000 people in that town. And there's one high school, so this thought of transferring somewhere else, and I try to live in those 1980s and 90s glory days of, hey, I went to first grade with this kid, and I'm suiting up with him as a junior in high school, But Jeff, I'm trying to hold on to that, but those days are gone for the most part in a whole lot of places.
And you know what? I could take it to the next level and just say, there are some other teams in that poll that are doing the same thing but differently.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
so all of a sudden, I'm dumping out Trinity League schools. I'm dumping out North Jersey United Red. It becomes a forest fire. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll do just a public versus private, but that's going to get people to complain because they're going to want to know where everybody stacks up, because that public school still wants to know where it stacks up against the private school.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's an argument that we could spend hours on.
Yeah, Jeff, since you've been around this, watching the national scene better than anybody, I really think that football is moving towards the privatization. IMG Academy, I think in 5 to 10 years, people are going to look back and go, remember when there was only one of them? Do you think that in 7-10 years we're going to see a lot less high school football teams and more privatization of high school football?
Could go either way. I kind of broke a story 2 years ago when I had Kevin Wright on the show, and Kevin had, I don't know if it was his first year or second year at IMG, and I had kind of broached the subject about forming kind of a private league that would be broken into quadrants, 4 or 5 regions, and you kind of play your championship to the Southeast, the Northeast, and then somebody like a Nike or an Under Armour comes in with a lot of money and they end up playing an overall kind of championship. And he said, yeah, that's it. The one thing that I throw into that mix to your question is, how do I want to phrase this? I think ultimately one of two things are going to happen. There's either going to be none of it because people are going to get fed up and it's not going to exist. So, for example, in the case of IMG, Georgia will not play them. I'm sorry, I think Georgia will play them. Texas has said they won't play them. California has kind of prohibited unless like a Corona Centennial needs to play them. So if no one wants to play IMG goes away, right?
Yeah.
So the IMGs of the world could fall off by attrition, natural attrition. I don't think that a Trinity League. I know there's a guy in the Northeast that's trying to pull something like this off. I think ultimately what will happen is IMG will go away, and then we'll just go back to kind of what we have, and then it's just a public-private discussion. It's not an academy discussion.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jeff, you have painstakingly written a book coming out real soon here in just a few days on September 4th called High School Football in Texas. Some are calling this book, a history book that really has never been written about Texas high school football. And although I'm born and bred here in Southern California, there is no doubt that Texas is the king of high school football. We've got some good teams here in California, but there's no doubt that Texas is king of high school football there. So tell me, Jeff, how did you go about, writing this book, High School Football in Texas? How did this come about, and what's it about?
Sure. Well, the title sort of tells it all. I didn't pick the title. My publisher, Skyhorse Publishing out of New York City, which is one of the largest independents in the country, they approached me at the end of 2016 with an idea, and they gave me the autonomy to basically tell them that the idea they originally had wasn't going to work. And they said, well, what do you think? And basically what I said was, back to my mantra of high school football, high school football, high school football, and telling them the story of America through the lens of it. I said, give me the opportunity to attack a state. They really wanted me to do Pennsylvania because of my roots and the great players from Pennsylvania. And they said, well, I said, well, first off, you got to sell books. So if we want to sell books, let's go to the motherland, if you will. And that's not a disrespect to the other 49 states. And I said, what I want to do is I want to get the greats from the state, and I will only do interviews on their high school memories. Everybody knows what Earl Campbell did at the collegiate and the professional level. Everybody knows what Drew Brees did, beyond Westlake High School. I said, I am going to pick up a phone and I'm going to get these people on the line, and I'm going to just discuss high school and come up with stories underneath that. And that's really the evolution of the book that comes out, as you said, in a couple of days on September 4th, 58,000 words later. And it was just, it not only was it a labor of love, and I know you've written a book, so I know what, you know how difficult it is to reach out to people. So some people I had to actually write letters to. I couldn't handwrite it because nobody can read my handwriting, but and you find stuff on Google and you go at it from that standpoint. And when it was all said and done, we've interviewed over 50 people, 9 Hall of Famers. Let's see, I think overall it's 37 players. There's coaches and parents in there, like Andy Dalton's mom and dad, Drew Brees' dad, and the book is completely high school football. There's a little blurb at the end of every chapter that talks about what the person did afterwards, which is kind of a joke to me. I mean, who doesn't know what LaDainian Tomlinson did? Since I know you're that Chargers guy.
Yeah.
So there's a paragraph here or there about that, I guess, for the novice. I don't know if the novice is going to pick up this book and buy it, but I do think that people will buy it. It's on pre-sale on Amazon, and Barnes and Noble, and I guess my publisher told me I also have to say wherever books are sold. We're just excited about it. The history part of it is those aren't my words. I've kind of given them to you a little bit, but there are people that I respect in Texas that have said, Jeff, I didn't even know half of these stories. So,
Wow.
Thank you for writing it, because there's a couple of, you got to send it out beforehand so people write, nice things about you, or if they don't, then you pay them to do that. No, I'm just teasing. They don't do that. So that's the impetus of the book. I don't know if I did a great job of it, but it literally is, me sitting down with Earl Campbell or a Bill Bradley, who's a legend, who was a left-footed punter for the Eagles, or Eric Dickerson, and all we talk about are their high school memories, and they loved what they were talking about. And in some cases, Bill Bradley, I spoke to him for 3 hours. Craig James, he said, "Yeah, I'll give you 20 minutes." It ended up being an hour and a half.
Wow.
So
Wow.
That's the impetus behind it.
Yeah, some of the other names I want to read here: Raymond Berry, Drew Brees, Andy Dalton, Derwin Gray, Mean Joe Green, Ken Houston, Bob Lilly, Andrew Luck. I mean, the list goes on. One of my favorites to ever play the game, Mike Singletary, Lovie Smith, LaDainian Tomlinson, Elmo Wright, couple Heisman Trophy winners, and Baker Mayfield and Johnny Manziel, Adrian Peterson, Johnny Lamb Jones, Brad Shear, Gene Stallings, Von Miller, and then some legends, out in Texas without a doubt, some even nationally. Ken Dabbs, Todd Dodds, Jonathan Gray, Kenneth Hall, Alan Lowry. So the list is rich in football names. 9 Hall of Famers. Were you able to sit down with Mike Singletary?
Yeah, well, on the phone. Yeah, all of this.
Yeah.
The only person I interviewed in person was Eric Dickerson. I did that up in Woodland Hills in Southern California.
Oh, nice.
There. He was doing a show for Fox, but everything else was done over the phone with a lot of graciousness on all of their parts. I think some of the people at first were skeptical because of the email or the note said, "I will only discuss high school sports." And by the time we got into it, Lovie Smith was wonderful, head coach Illinois now, former Bears head coach. And Lovie said, "Jeff," he said, whenever anybody calls up and says they want to talk Big Sandy football, that's his little tiny community, which I actually stopped at on my drive across the country. That was a team that set a national scoring record, and the defense only gave up 15 points all year long.
Holy
and he said one was
smokes.
because the DB fell down. And
Wow.
They gave up. They actually fell behind in the state championship game 2-0, which kind of ticked them off a little bit. But the point is, Lovie said, if anybody ever calls and says they want to talk Big Sandy football, he told us to the sports information director, put them through. I will stop everything to talk about my high school football days.
I'm sure a lot of guys kind of think that way. I mean, did you get that response from others where they just lit up talking about high school football?
They lit up, but I think there was some they were a little suspicious going in. Like, okay, so does Jeff really want to talk about Tyler football, or does Jeff want to talk about Earl Campbell and his, issues with, he's a broken down running back because he was so damn tough. So, but that went away very, very quickly, and each and every one of them. I mean, I go back to Trish, my muse. She would always say, "Well, have you talked to them before?" And I would say, "No." She said, "Well, it looks like you guys have been friends for a long time." I said, "That's because that's the essence of the book. The essence of the book is taking people back to the stuff that really, really mattered. That last bastion of amateurism, where they didn't have to worry about, the everything that goes along with college football and high school football. And the thing that I'm proud of is a person like Lovie Smith or Alan Lowry, who was part of the Music City Miracle. Ken Dabbs, who's in the book, who was the second overall recruiting coordinator under Darrell Royal at Texas. I mean, the coaches were the guys that really lit up because they understood what high school, or they understand what high school football means, and it did then and it does now.
Yeah. No, that's really cool to hear that these guys were open, at least, maybe getting through their people, some of them, or however many emails or handwritten letters or faxes you had to send out. At least you're able to talk to some of these guys. Just some tremendous football name. So share with us your absolute favorite Texas high school football story from this research. Or maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to tease us a little bit with part of it.
Okay. Yeah. You know what? Well, first off, I would say out of everyone, read the chapter on Ken Dabbs. He is spiced throughout it. This guy is the godfather of Texas high school football, and most people listening to this won't know who he is. And if they do, then they'll go, "Yeah, you're right, Jeff." He literally recruited Earl Campbell and Brad Shearer. That is the only coach in America to ever recruit a guy that won the Heisman Trophy and the Outland Trophy in the same year at the University of Texas, and that's Earl Campbell and Brad Shearer.
Wow.
But my teaser story on why people should buy the book is Ken Houston, the Hall of Fame DB for the Washington Redskins. Most people know him as that. He played for Houston, the Oilers before that. And I got Ken through Googling and finding a number, and then you got to call the number, and gee, is this really Ken Houston? His wife answered, and we had a wonderful 2-hour chat.
Wow.
Ken Houston grew up in Lufkin, Texas, which is East Texas, a small town. And he was a kid that loved baseball, ran track. He was a better basketball player than he was a football player because he never played football until his sophomore year. So Ken kind of takes me on this journey. This is during segregation. So he plays at Lufkin Dunbar, which is the African American school. So you've got Lufkin on the other side of town. They all played at the same stadium, and Ken tells the story how white Lufkin loved to come see the black kids play, at Lufkin Dunbar. So as he's taking me on this journey, and he's 72 years old. He's very eloquent. He remembers a lot of things. He likes talking about his small town. He loves talking about his coach, Elmer Red, who, by the way, is really the guy that created the, Bill Yeoman at the University of Houston is credited with the Veer offense. It was Elmer Red at Lufkin Dunbar who created the Veer offense. He just went to Houston and helped Bill Yeoman with it. But,
wow.
History will write it another way. So that's not the great part of the story. So as I'm telling the story, Ken suggests that, he didn't play football. He really didn't enjoy it all that much. He was a small kid. And he said, Jeff, I started as a sophomore. I said, well, Ken, why'd you decide then to go out for football? And he said, well, Jeff, the truth of the matter is I found this girl I was a little sweet on. And I didn't think she would actually date a man because he was in the band. He played in the band as a freshman. So he was, he was playing at halftime of the football game.
Wow.
And I said, okay, Ken, well, that's cool. So what you're telling me is you went out to you went out for the football team because you wanted to get a date. He said, well, that's absolutely true. So that's the tease, because the question is, did he get the date? We know he's in the Hall of Fame, but did he get the date?
Did he get the date? I love it.
I'm gonna leave that one up to people to buy the book at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or wherever books are sold.
There you go. We're talking about Jeff Fisher's book, High School Football in Texas, coming out here within the week on September 4th, wherever books are sold. High School Football in Texas by Jeff Fisher of highschoolfootballamerica.com. Jeff, first of all, let me ask you this. Did any of these guys, because, like you said, 9 Hall of Famers, couple Heisman Trophy winners, I don't know my Texas history, did any of these guys play at the same high school?
Yeah, and that's a good one. Going back to the coaching thing, 2 of the greatest coaches ever, Coach Gene Stallings, who is in the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta, and Raymond Berry, who coached the Patriots against the great Bears team in '85. Both of them are from Paris, Texas, not Paris, France, Paris, Texas. And, got them through a woman who knew Coach Stallings and Coach Berry very, very well. They're both in their early 80s. And, that's it. And they actually coached against each other, which is written in the book, in the Hall of Fame game, what it was called back in the day, in Canton, the first exhibition game of the season. back in what would that have been, 86, I guess. It was after the year the Patriots went to the Super Bowl. And that was Coach Stallings' first year with the Cardinals. And they squared off against each other. So there's a nice little story in the book about that. Yeah, it really – and Coach Stallings, wow, what a memory. I mean, both of them have great memories. But Coach Stallings, I got to be honest, I had to be on my game. But I was a little nervous, but he made me feel so comfortable. And, again, it's a small little town there in Texas. But, a college football Hall of Famer and a pro football Hall of Famer from Little Paris, Texas.
That's tremendous. That's really cool to hear. Well, I know that's going to be a great book to read, without a doubt. I'm a history buff, and I love high school football. And like I said earlier, no one does it better than Texas. So what is it about – why is football so stinking special in Texas? What is it about Texas and football that makes it so great?
In some ways, because I have been to so many other states personally, I sometimes can push back on it a little bit because, Easton, Pennsylvania, I just go to my hometown, not to disrespect anybody else, it's pretty big, 10,000 people there. I've been there on the ground. I've broken bread with so many coaches. I don't know what it is. It's just part of the DNA, which goes back to it. It's the fabric of the community. Why is it that way? I'm not sure. Yeah. My suspicion is maybe all communities had this, but they've kind of lost it through the years. I've always questioned my Southern California people may want to beat me over the head after this statement, but I've always felt that Southern California, it's kind of like the Dodgers game. Everybody leaves in the seventh inning or whatever. Yeah. I never got that. I just don't think Texas has lost it. Texas is so big. If you've never driven across it, I mean, I've driven across it 6 times, one this way, one. It's a big, and there's so many tiny towns there, and there's nothing else to do there. So it's kind of like the big carnival every Friday night for, 5 weeks a year, I guess is the best way to put it if you get 5 home games or 6. So I'm not sure, but time, again, times have not changed, I guess that's the best way to put it. I mean, why would Lovie Smith, as the head coach at the University of Illinois in the Big Ten, literally say, and he said this when he got on the phone, he said, I told my guy, time to talk. And he spent an hour of his day talking to me about that. Yeah. Again, I don't know if I am eloquent enough to put that into words. All I can tell you is there is nothing like it, and you should put it on a bucket list. I mean, it is a thing to see and a thing to behold. And I would say, and Andy Dalton's on the cover, from Katy, Texas, and Andy was great. But instead of going to Allen where there's 18,000, 20,000, or Katy with 14, 15,000, I would suggest going to a Big Sandy, going to these tiny little towns and see the game there, and then you'll really get it. Because a lot of these places, may have a population. There's 2 6-man teams in what is it, the Southwest Texas, I guess, and there are 2 6-man teams, combined population of like, I don't know, 2,800, 3,000, something like that, and they drew 4,000 to a game once.
Wow!
How does that happen? I'm not good at math, but how does that happen?
Yeah. Wow. I don't want to say his name because I haven't asked him permission, but there's a coach who spent a long time here in California, chased a dream to go out to Texas to coach, and he said his first, and he told this story in a clinic, but the first game he saw like 10 o'clock in the morning, for his first away game in Texas at 10 or 11 in the morning, he saw this big, huge barbecue type thing on, like on a trailer, right? This large barbecue on a trailer, being pulled behind this huge dually truck, and they came and they parked right behind the team bus, which is sitting there at 10 o'clock in the morning. And he said, asked an assistant, what's that thing doing out there? He said, they follow us to the game. And and a little later, he saw 4 or 5 more buses pull up. This was not too long before they were going to leave. And he said, what the heck we need 2 buses. What are all these? Coach, that's filled with fans. They're all going to follow us.
apparently nobody had alerted the head coach to this literal parade that they take, and then he said that this 2 police officers on motorcycles showed up, and he said he thought he was just going to, their first away game, kind of one of those preseason games, and it ends up looking like they're going, to a state championship game, and he said that's when I realized I was in Texas. So
yeah, and you know what? What you just said there maybe it gives me a better shot at the answer to the last question, because I don't think I did a good job with it. Community. Let's boil it down to that community. Yeah. There is community there, and that doesn't mean other states don't have that community, but community, drives that vehicle that drives it. Certainly, Friday Night Lights, the book, which turned into a movie, which turned into a TV show, helped accentuate it a little bit. But it's a real deal. I mean, it's the real deal there. As a matter of fact, I've become friends with the AD. They're at Odessa Permian. They're going to have me out for a book signing this year for the book, even though they don't have anybody in it, although Roy Williams will be in the second one that I write. But there's nothing out there. I drove up to Ratcliffe Stadium from the famous Friday Night Lights, and it's in the middle of, nothing with oil fields around it. It's America. And, again, I have to, salute Trish. She took high school football and put America on the back of it. And, again, much smarter than I am. And that's why we are where we are right now.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I certainly appreciate your time. We've spent a lot of time here today. You and I could, we could go on for hours, but my listeners will probably get bored. So,
well, hopefully we didn't. I know that, but hopefully they didn't get too bored. But I appreciate you, Chris, and everything you do for the sport as not only a coach and an administrator, but your heart and your head is in the right place for it. So thank you for everything you do for high school football.
Thank you for that. So this is Jeff Fisher. Check out Jeff on Twitter. It's at Jeff Fisher Media, JEFFFISHER Media, MEDIE, at Jeff Fisher Media. Instagram, High School Football America. His website, folks, you got to check it out. highschoolfootballamerica.com. A lot of very, very cool stuff on there. I think it's an authority on high school football in America, in my opinion, in many ways. It's not the stats and recruiting thing that everybody else has. So check out High School Football America. And then, folks, check out his book, High School Football in Texas, coming out in just a few days on September 4th. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever else books are sold. Jeff, have a great rest of the summer, my friend.
Well, Chris, thank you again. I will. And again, just thank you for your friendship. Really appreciate it.
All right, Jeff, thank you.
Hey, that's it. That wraps up episode 14 of the Coach's Locker podcast. Jeff, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. I'm going to put in the show notes. The show notes are at 8laces.org/podcast, 8laces.org/podcast, okay? Again, 8laces.org/podcast. I'm going to put a show notes. I'm going to put links to Jeff's websites and his book and a little more information about Jeff. So, again, 8laces.org/podcast. You can find information about Jeff, get links to his website, and information for his book. Remember to check out the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear our entire lineup of top football coaches. We've got some great coaches as a part of this network here to help you become a better coach. Find me on Twitter at Coach Fore, COACHFORE. And as I said, my podcast home, 8laces.org, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast, PODCAST for my email, all the ways to follow me, and a list of all the shows we've had so far. I'm going to give away one of Jeff's books if you're still listening. I'm going to give away one of Jeff's books to whoever tweets at me and Jeff. You got to tweet something along the lines. That's at Coach Fore, at HSFB America. Okay, at Coach Fore, at HSFB America. Hey guys, great podcast. Love the show, something like that. Look forward to your new book about high school football in Texas, something along those lines. And then you got to hashtag the number 78. My jersey number, 78. Okay, so the first person that sends me and Jeff a tweet with something about today's show and the hashtag 78, I'm going to ship you out personally. I'm going to get you one of Jeff's books on my dime here, because I appreciate you listening. Again, thank you for checking out episode 14 of the Coach's Locker Podcast. We'll see you next week.